Coming up in today's newscast, Israeli security forces finally capture a wanted terror suspect. Iranians start showing support for the Jewish state in a beautiful hashtag-filled way. And Jerusalem greets a courageous guest who paid a big price in the name of peace. Israeli security forces have just announced that they finally captured the Palestinian man suspected in the killing of IDF soldier Ronen Lubalski. Earlier this month, Lubalski's Duvdevan unit was conducting overnight raids in a Palestinian town in the West Bank when a suspect dropped a large stone slab on his head from above. Sergeant Lubalski sadly passed away after fighting for his life in the hospital. The Shin Bet has named the captured suspect as 32-year-old Islam Youssef Abu Hamid. After an intense manhunt, he was arrested in a Palestinian refugee camp near Ramallah sometime last week. The arrest has been under gag order from the public until today. Officials say that Hamid has a long history of terror-related activities. He apparently has several brothers who are members of Hamas. Hamid himself had served 5 years in an Israeli prison for work he'd done for Hamas as well. Meanwhile, the country is still reeling from an attempted terror attack earlier this week. 18-year-old Shuva Malka is still in serious, though stable condition after being stabbed multiple times by a Palestinian man in Afula. The suspect was captured by officers after a short chase. Prime Minister Netanyahu has promised that justice will be served as quickly as possible. Where politics have failed, it looks like Twitter may be the greatest hope for peace. Iran's leaders have just rallied thousands of citizens in an anti-Israel march for Quds Day. But some Iranians are rebelling against the regime in a truly beautiful way. They've organized a Twitter campaign under the hashtag #WeStandWithIsrael, sending Israelis messages of love for all the world to see. Israel's foreign ministry says that the hashtag has already gone viral, hitting tens of thousands of tweets since last Friday. The campaign itself mirrors similar Israeli-led digital efforts to build bridges with the Iranian people. Some of them, like the Israel and Persian campaign, are even sponsored by the Israeli government. Iran's leaders have consistently promised to wipe Israel off the map and mobilize terror regimes around the region to do precisely that. But the people of Iran have often risen up against the regime's hateful oppression. Many also remember the era before the 1979 Islamic Revolution, when Iran and Israel were actually close allies. For these reasons and more, the current regime regularly blocks its citizens from certain social media sites. But if these incredible messages of hope, coexistence, and peace for the people of Israel mean anything, it's that love will always find a way. So, if you want to see something that'll really make you smile, search for the hashtag #WeStandWithIsrael and send a message back. In what's now become an awkward mix-up, it turns out that contrary to belief, Prime Minister Netanyahu was not questioned again yesterday over the Bezek affair, otherwise known as Case 4000. Instead, he was questioned for the first time in Case 3000, or the submarines affair, and it looks like the misconception may have been intentional. Police reportedly leaked a false report to catch Prime Minister Netanyahu off guard. Here now with more details is Olit Chayun, expert in criminal law. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, good evening.
All right, so Netanyahu is not officially a suspect in this case. So why did we see this whole police charade?
I think we need to think and to understand that some politicians and media people are standing behind this very, very aggressive campaign against Prime Minister Netanyahu in connection with the submarine case. I think their behavior is irresponsible, as it really caused damage to Israel also in our international relations, in our reputation, and also it damaged the public confidence in our leadership. And I think many people are quite fed up from the fact that every day we open the television, we hear about this case, and there is, even though that it's more than a year that we hear it, we know that Netanyahu is not involved, and it's only the lower level of personnel that is involved in this case. And I think it's our obligation to ask why it's repeatable still in the media and not done anything to allow him to clear his name.
Well, reportedly, Netanyahu's testimony was primarily focused on the purchasing of weapons. Netanyahu said that there was no fault in the government's procedural conduct, and yet he also did not know about his lawyer's conflict of interest here either. So is there a fault in the procedure that we're seing here? What could have happened?
Listen, I'm not familiar with all the small details of this case. What I only know is what we all know from the media, as I didn't represent Netanyahu. And I think that the media has, or somebody is trying to give false information to the media. And also, if is investigation that is still going on, the police shouldn't leak information which is partial and not full. And we are, as public, needs to know the whole picture when they will have a conclusion of this case. Then we can understand and know if there was any problem in the conduct of the government, if there was any conflict of interest and what the conflict was, or whether we should accept what Prime Minister Netanyahu gave in his testimony and accept it.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Israeli police have just evicted the last of the demonstrators from 15 Jewish homes in the West Bank outpost of Netiv Havot. These clashes eventually became quite violent, and at this time, 9 officers have been injured in the scuffle, and several of the picketers have actually been arrested. Now that the buildings have been cleared, the court-mandated demolition of these homes has already begun. This comes nearly 2 years after Israel's high courts ruled that the outpost had been built illegally on Palestinian-owned land. This demolition was originally set for March, but residents were given a 3-month delay to relocate. The resistance seen yesterday, which saw over 2,000 Israeli troops dispatched in response to hundreds of protesters, was brutal to the very end.
At the moment, the Israeli National Police have evacuated 14 houses out of the 15. This is the last evacuation that is taking place. In the area, there are hundreds of police officers that are working carefully and cautiously to make sure that there won't be any injuries, but at the same time, we're not taking any chances whatsoever and dealing with the situation in order to complete the evacuation this afternoon.
After the first 14 homes were cleared with mostly passive resistance, hundreds of settler youths barricaded themselves in the final structure. Several were arrested for hurling debris at cops from the roof. They fortified their position with boulders and wire fencing. Police proceeded to force their way in and restrain each protester one by one. Though some of the police injuries were fairly minor, others required immediate medical care. Today, the United Nations will vote on whether or not to condemn Israel for the IDF's conduct during the recent Gaza clashes. This vote at the General Assembly, where resolutions are non-binding, actually comes shortly after the U.S. vetoed a similar declaration at the UN Security Council. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with more. And Brett, what can we expect to see today?
Well, by now it's pretty obvious that today's resolution will likely pass by a considerable margin. The Palestinians enjoy something of a presumed majority when it comes to votes in the General Assembly, as Israel, of course, knows all too well. But there's actually a different X factor at play here. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, is presenting an amendment to the current resolution, which would specifically place Hamas as blame for the unrest seen in recent months along the Gaza border. And this is actually the first time that something like this will be put to the UN for a vote at all.
Well, I will say that the resolution in its current form doesn't appear to mention Hamas anywhere in the text. In fact, it places full blame for over 100 Palestinian deaths in those clashes squarely on Israel. And this is despite the fact that over a third of those killed were confirmed by Hamas itself as members of the terror group.
Right. Well, this is the basis, of course, of Haley's amendment to the resolution. Now, the original document demands the, quote, protection of the Palestinian civilian population in Gaza. Haley's additions would amend that to include the danger that Gazans face due to destabilizing behavior from Hamas. And these changes will be voted on before the resolution actually hits the floor. If it's adopted, then that's the version that will be voted on. And if not, then the original resolution will stay the standard.
Right. And what are the chances that Haley's amendments will clear the vote, or that these changes will be adopted?
Well, I would say pretty slim. The resolution in its current form has amassed a lot of backing from Arab nations that are still strongly aligned with the Palestinian cause. And on top of that, other nations will probably want to stick with the original text just because they don't really understand still the full details of what exactly happened in Gaza. Because while you do have many confirmed terror members among the dead, there's still also the matter of several minors a medic, a journalist, etc. And Israel has remained very, very firm in its position that all these deaths were in line with the Army's protocol. Having said that, we'll probably see a lot of countries abstain from this vote altogether. So kind of like the UN resolution that condemned Trump's recognition of Jerusalem a couple months ago, we'll learn a lot just by which countries don't vote today at all.
Well, the Human Rights Watch just hours ago stated that Israel's conduct in these clashes may constitute as war crimes. The Palestinians have appealed to the international courts for a full investigation, and such a probe has yet to solidify. So we'll certainly be watching today's vote, and thanks for the update, Brett.
Of course.
For over a decade, the Hindu Samhati organization in India has been protecting the poor and disenfranchised of West Bengal. But they've also been among the biggest supporters of Israeli-Indian relations. In fact, on their anniversary last February, Hindu Samhati organized 70,000 demonstrators to call on India to move its embassy to Jerusalem. Well, now they're here in Israel, and joining us on the program is Hindu Samhati's founder, Tapan Ghosh. Thanks for joining us.
Shalom, namaste.
Shalom, namaste. All right, so let's begin with, kind of the issues that your community has been dealing with on the border with Bangladesh. How does this compare to some of the struggles that Israel has?
See, Israel is encircled by the Islamic countries. But in our West Bengal, our eastern neighbor is an Islamic country, Bangladesh. And continuous infiltration, Muslim infiltration happened to to our West Bengal and also to other parts of eastern India, because there are porous border, no strict border fence, etc. Therefore, the terrorists, the JMB, Jamaat Mujahideen Bangladesh, they are terrorists, they come and go, even they prepare bombs in West Bengal to export to Bangladesh for terrorist activities, and ultimate sufferer are our border people.
So what has your organization been doing to combat these issues?
In the border areas, we organize the Hindu youths to stop, to identify any suspicious activity or suspicious movement, and instantly give the report to the local administration, also to our head office, so that we can take action, quick action.
Now, it's interesting because India only formally recognized Israel in 1991, and in 2015 opinion polls in India indicated that nearly 70% of Indians actually have positive views towards the state of Israel. How do you feel when you hear these statistics, especially kind of given comparisons that exist between the struggles that Israel and India are both dealing with?
See, this is my first visit to Israel, and this is two purpose. It is one of my pilgrimage, because Israel is a model country for us. After long 2000-year struggle, they regained their land, and we lost our land. Afghanistan was earlier Gandhar part of India, and even in 1947, when we got freedom, we lost a vast area of our land, the Pakistan and Bangladesh, which was earlier East Pakistan. This Pakistan and Bangladesh were part of India, and we lost at the cost of our freedom. Therefore, it is our dream. We should know what is the inspiration, what is the motivation of the Jewish people to struggle so long and so hard, so that we also can protect our territory, and in future we can also regain our lost land.
All right. Well, Tapan, thank you so much for joining us, and it will be interesting to see what comes of this visit you have here in Israel.
Thank you.
Nobody is perfect, but according to an Israeli census, we may apparently be even worse than we think. Humans have wiped out 83% of the mammal and plant life on Earth. And that's according to a new study conducted by Israel's Weizmann Institute of Science. The groundbreaking examination with the California Institute of Technology is the first comprehensive estimate of the impact that humanity has made on the total biomass of the planet. What's more, it turns out humans make up just 0.01% of the world's living creatures. By comparison, all marine life totals to 1% of life on Earth. Weizmann Institute professor Ron Milo says the numbers are pretty staggering, especially with only 4% of the world's mammal population now considered wild. That means that the remaining 96% of all mammals on Earth are livestock, and us. The bird population isn't too different either, since just 30% of all birds are said to be free. In order to compile this research, the authors of the study evaluated carbon units for each type of life form that we know of. And there's a lot that we know we don't know of. The good news, though, if there is some, is that plants were found to be the most dominant organisms on the planet. In fact, they make up 80% of all life on Earth, and that's fortunate since we need them to breathe. Speaking of the environment, air pollution poses a deadly health crisis for our world, which is why we need to be able to depend on the factories and businesses around us to be smart and transparent when it comes to their emissions. Today, we hear about the main 6 forms of pollution: CAPS, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, lead, and particulates. But here's the scary truth. There are hundreds of thousands of different chemicals being emitted by local chemical factories and refineries that just aren't being monitored. Well, that's about to change, and it's all thanks to an Israeli company called Atmosphere. Atmosphere has developed a technology to help factories reduce emissions and stay in compliance with local environmental laws by monitoring and measuring the chemicals and compounds that they're emitting.
What's unique about our technology that we can measure dozens of compounds simultaneously with absolute certainty, and we can give the factory also the source of the emissions so we can go and fix the problem before it's become a bigger problem.
But Atmosphere does a lot more than just help refineries stay on track. The Israeli company also helps build trust with the public by making all of its data transparent. That's especially important given some of the shocking statistics coming out of the petrochemical industry.
90% of the emission from the petrochemical industry are not being measured today.
Atmosphere's work is more important than ever nowadays, especially given the recent major changes in U.S. legislation surrounding air pollution. The state of California has just passed a law requiring refineries and factories to measure their emissions much more carefully. In fact, all petroleum refineries in California must now install, operate, and maintain air monitoring systems, not only from within their compounds, but all the way up to the boundaries and fences that separate them from the public. The actual emissions from the petrochemical industry are estimated to be 30 to 100 times higher than what's reported by typical air monitoring models, because a lot of the emissions come out of storage and process facilities in petrochemical factories, and not just out of their chimneys, which have typically been the only source for measurement in the past. Atmosphere offers a unique open-path monitoring system that can actually measure tens of chemical pollutants in very low concentrations, meaning the company can provide the highest level of quality assurance to refineries and the public. Because the sad truth is, if we want to reduce emissions, we have to monitor them 24/7.
The situation today is like a guy that closes his eyes through the air that it breathes. We actually don't measure all the compounds that we breathe into our lungs, and Atmosphere gives the ability to measure all the compounds that we can breathe.
Turning back now to one of the most important issues on Israel's horizon, the final destination for Eurovision 2019. We've just learned that Eurovision organizers have informed Israel that they don't have a problem with hosting the contest in Jerusalem after all, but that's only as long as Israeli ministers stay away from the event. They probably don't mean that literally, of course. The European Broadcasting Union is likely referring to recent comments made by Israeli leaders, which have ignited accusations of politicizing Eurovision for the government. The unnamed official is quoted as saying, "We have broadcast from Jerusalem in the past, and as far as we're concerned, we can do it again. But your politicians are creating problems for us because they're highlighting it and turning it into a political issue, sending us letters with demands." Though Eurovision has indeed been held in Jerusalem twice in past years, the times now are quite different. President Trump's decision to recognize the city as Israel's capital has divided the world like never before, pushing Palestinians and their advocates far from the negotiating table. That debate claimed its first concrete victim just last week when Argentina called off a friendly soccer match with Israel after the government moved the setting from Haifa to Jerusalem. Though Argentine soccer officials confirmed that players received death threats if they proceeded to play in Jerusalem, it soon emerged that intergovernment dealings may have been the straw to break the camel's back. Miri Regev's Culture and Sports Ministry was accused of only putting a third of the game's tickets on sale, while earmarking the other 20,000 for ministry officials and NGOs. Regev herself was accused of fronting the cash to make the move on the condition of a contractual photo op with superstar Lionel Messi on the field. Argentina would ultimately admit that the game's change of venue to Jerusalem was a prime factor in the decision to cancel. Israeli officials have reportedly opted to refrain from placing similar pressure on Eurovision organizers. Obviously, nobody wants history to repeat itself. Well, just last year, a huge scandal broke out when Miss Israel Adal Gandelsman posed alongside Iraq's representative, Sarah Idan, at the 2017 Miss Universe pageant and then shared that photo on Instagram. Well, both social media accounts were flooded with controversial comments, making the photo go viral. And even though Idan received a lot of backlash from her home country for the image, she's now visiting Israel. ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh, of course, has all of the details. Emmanuel.
All right, yes. Well, like you said, we did cover this story last year in the 2017 Miss Universe competition. They both posted a picture together, basically saying that clearly we can, be friends and have peace and everything will be fine. They got crazy backlash. Their Instagram's accounts, their social media accounts were all hacked. They got death threats, and this is actually the photo from the competition from Miss Universe. Idan actually had an interview with CNN where she shared that she had to actually flee the country because she got death threats, and a lot of people, it was a scary situation for her and for her family. She was really upset about it, but she said she would never do that. She would never, take that back. She was very happy about the decision.
And I remember when we covered this story, it was really devastating to see not only her, but her family actually have to leave the country as a result of, just posting a photo on the internet. But it's very impressive that she actually stood up for her beliefs and refused to take it down.
She's here.
Yeah, she clearly thinks she has a lasting friendship with Miss Israel, right? Did they meet each other?
So they did meet each other. They clearly here you can see that they're reuniting for a magazine photo shoot. They posted a video together of saying hello both in Hebrew and in Arabic. There you go. That's them. They're just sharing and showing the world that, they have a lot of people looking at them and a lot of controversial looks and views from what they're doing, but they do stand together, and that's actually
they almost look like twins when you look at this video. I had to look at it twice to figure out who was Miss Israel.
Exactly. So it's actually funny because Idan, Miss Iraq, said that Miss Israel was actually really nervous to say hi to her in the beginning. She didn't know how they were going to talk and how they were going to connect, and they ended up spending hours together talking.
Yeah, they look like they're close friends. Also, Idan is a pretty typical Israeli name.
Yeah, and so she
visited.
She visited. She was welcomed really with open arms. She was hugged in Machne Yehuda, which is a market in Jerusalem.
Also, there's a huge Iraqi Jewish population here. So there are a lot of people from Iraq that live in the state of Israel. So
they're all really happy and they're very supportive, and they just keep saying how how brave she is, how inspirational she is, and how they are together. So
it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and what the backlash she's going to receive.
She already has received, and same with Miss Israel. So we'll see from there.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Samru Ulpan, open to everyone.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. There are many courageous acts that are worth talking about, like Miss Iraq risking her reputation to take a selfie with Miss Israel. That's why today's Hebrew word of the day is la'arich, or to appreciate, evaluate, and assess. We should always la'arich the people around us. It's not only a testament to their character, it's also a reflection of our own. I know I love showing my a'aracha, or appreciation, to those who help me when I need it most, and I hope you do the same. It feels good. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be partly cloudy and with a drop in temperatures to a low of around 72 or 22 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow should be clear to partly cloudy, but with a rise in temperatures, and the high is expected to be about 85 or 29 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.59 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.